was discriminated against all my life because of my golden child sister, who was always treated like a princess while I was ignored and blamed for everything. Finally, I got my sweet and perfect revenge on my wedding day in a way no one ever expected. Ever since I could remember, my life revolved around comparisons, judgments, and constant reminders that I was never enough. My parents never had to say it directly. Their actions screamed louder than words ever could. My sister, Emma, was always the favorite, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. From the moment she was born, it was like the world revolved around her. Everyone adored her laugh, praised her looks, and celebrated every tiny thing she did as if she was some kind of miracle. And me. I was just there, the background noise to her melody, the shadow that filled the corners of her spotlight. I used to watch the way my parents' eyes lit up when Emma walked into the room, how they would drop everything to listen to her stories, no matter how small or silly they were. But when I spoke, they'd nod absently or change the subject, as if my words had no weight. I tried so hard to earn their attention, to make them proud. I'd bring home drawings from school, little crafts I made just for them, hoping for even the smallest hint of excitement. But they'd smile politely and place them aside, saving their real praise for Emma's next achievement, no matter how minor it was. Every family member, every neighbor, every teacher seemed to play along in this unspoken rule that Emma was special and I was ordinary. It's strange how, as a child, you don't understand favoritism, you just feel it. You feel it in the way love is divided unevenly, in the tone of voice, in the quiet moments when you realize you're invisible in your own home. And over time, that feeling doesn't fade. It grows, shaping who you become and how you see yourself forever. Emma always had a way of getting everything she wanted without even asking for it. My parents spoiled her endlessly, showering her with gifts, attention, and affection that I could only dream of receiving. If Emma mentioned wanting a new phone, they'd buy it the next day. If she said she liked a certain dress, my mother would rush to get it for her. But when I needed something, even something small or necessary, I was told to be patient or that money doesn't grow on trees. It wasn't just the material things that hurt, it was the way love itself was distributed in our home. When I came home with excellent grades, no one seemed to care. My report card would be left on the table, barely glanced at, while Emma's average scores were celebrated like she had won an award. My father would take her out for dinner to reward her hard work, while I stayed behind, pretending it didn't bother me. The few times I tried to speak up, I was accused of being jealous, of not appreciating my sister's success. That word burned every time I heard it because deep down, I knew her success was simply existing, while mine was constantly overlooked. The comparisons never stopped, in school, in behavior, in looks. I was too quiet, too serious, too plain. Emma, on the other hand, was full of life, so beautiful, so perfect. Everyone loved her, and I became the invisible sibling whose presence barely mattered. I used to lie awake at night wondering what was wrong with me, why my parents couldn't love us equally. It was a constant ache, a quiet kind of pain that settled in my heart and stayed there, reminding me that I would never be enough in their eyes. I spent most of my childhood trying to earn my parents' love and approval, as if it was some kind of prize I could win if I just tried hard enough. I believed that if I was kind, obedient, and hardworking, they'd finally see me, really see me, the way they saw Emma. So I did everything I could to make them proud. I helped around the house, took care of small chores without being asked, and tried to make things easier for everyone. When Emma made mistakes, I covered for her, hoping they'd notice my loyalty, my effort, my quiet love. But instead of appreciation, I got silence, and sometimes even blame for things I didn't do. It was as if no matter how much I gave, it was never enough to earn their attention. When Emma forgot her homework, I'd stay up late helping her redo it. When she got in trouble at school, I'd take the scolding for her because I couldn't stand to see her cry. But even that didn't matter. My parents would still praise her for trying her best, and look at me as if I were just doing what was expected. Slowly, I began to realize that in our home, fairness didn't exist. Emma's mistakes were brushed off as learning experiences, while mine were treated like failures. She was called unique when she was stubborn, but I was called difficult when I spoke up. The double standards were exhausting, and I often wondered if maybe I was the problem, if something about me made me less lovable. I started keeping my feelings to myself, pretending I was fine, because expressing hurt only made them tell me I was overreacting. All I wanted was their love, but it felt like chasing something that was never meant for me. Birthdays were the hardest days for me growing up because they reminded me of how differently Emma and I were treated. Every year, my parents went all out for her. The house would be decorated with balloons, ribbons, and banners. They'd invite relatives, friends, and neighbors, hire photographers, order a huge cake, and buy her the most expensive gifts. She would always be the center of attention, glowing with happiness while everyone praised her for being so special. I used to watch from the side, clapping and smiling, pretending it didn't hurt to be forgotten. My birthdays, on the other hand, were always simple, too simple, almost empty. Some years, there wasn't even a cake. My mother would say, "We are short on money this time," or, "You don't need a big celebration, you're mature now." But somehow, the money and energy would always appear again when Emma's turn came around. I remember one year, I asked for a small celebration with just my friends, nothing fancy, just something to make me feel remembered. My parents said no, claiming it was unnecessary. Yet 2 months later, Emma had a birthday bash so grand it looked like a wedding. I pretended to be happy for her, but inside, it broke something in me. I stopped looking forward to my birthdays altogether because I already knew how they'd go. Quiet dinners, half-hearted wishes, and a hollow feeling of being invisible. I used to think maybe they just forgot, but you can't forget someone every single year. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was favoritism disguised as circumstances. Over time, I learned to stop expecting anything at all. It's strange how a child's heart learns to adjust to neglect, how it learns to stop hoping for love it knows will never come, even on days meant to celebrate it. As we grew older, the differences between Emma and me only became more obvious. She wasn't just treated like the favorite anymore, she acted like it. She had this air of superiority around her, like she knew she was untouchable. She would boss me around, make fun of the way I dressed, and mock my interests as if everything about me was beneath her. Whenever she insulted me or made me cry, my parents would laugh it off and say, "She's just joking, don't take it so seriously." But it wasn't a joke. It was constant, deliberate, and cruel. Emma knew exactly how to push my buttons, how to make me feel small. She'd call me boring, plain, and dull while flaunting her charm and confidence. At family gatherings, she would interrupt me whenever I spoke and turn the attention back to herself. Everyone adored her confidence, never realizing that her glow came from dimming mine. The worst part was how my parents encouraged it without realizing it. They always compared us, saying things like, "Why can't you be more like Emma?" Or "Look at her, always so cheerful and social." Those words cut deep because no matter what I did, I could never measure up to their perfect daughter. I tried to tell them how it made me feel, but they dismissed me, saying I was being too sensitive. Eventually, I stopped fighting back. I let Emma have her way, let her be the center of attention, because it was easier than being ridiculed. But inside, resentment grew, slow and silent like a poison. Every insult, every laugh at my expense, every moment they dismissed my pain, it all built up. I started to realize that my kindness only made me easier to hurt, and one day, I'd stop letting them. When I finally got into college, I thought things would change. I believed that leaving home, studying hard, and building a future for myself would finally earn me some respect. I worked tirelessly through school, saving every bit of money I could from part-time jobs, hoping to lighten the financial burden on my parents. For the first time, I felt like I was doing something meaningful, something they would be proud of. But once again, Emma found a way to steal the spotlight. Just as I was preparing for my first semester, my parents told me they had to use my savings for something important. I was confused at first, and then they said it was to buy Emma a car for her safety. They justified it by saying she had to drive to her college classes and that public transport wasn't safe for her. I was speechless. I had worked for that money, sacrificed outings and simple pleasures to save it, and now it was gone, just like that. Meanwhile, I had to take long bus rides every day, spending hours commuting back and forth while Emma flaunted her new car like a trophy. She would even offer me rides sometimes, not out of kindness, but just to remind me who had the better life. My parents didn't see the pain in my eyes or the bitterness that grew stronger each day. They only saw Emma's comfort as their top priority. I never complained because I knew it wouldn't matter. My feelings had never mattered to them. But that incident changed something inside me. It was the first time I stopped trying to win their love. Instead, I promised myself that one day, I would succeed on my own and make sure they'd see what they had overlooked all along. Despite everything I had gone through, I kept pushing forward because I refused to let the way my family treated me define the rest of my life. I focused on my studies, worked extra shifts, and slowly built a life for myself piece by piece. While Emma was busy enjoying the comfort my parents endlessly provided, I was learning how to survive on my own. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I broke down from exhaustion, wondering why I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But deep down, I knew I was building something more valuable: independence. After graduation, I got a decent job and started earning well enough to support myself without needing anyone. I thought that maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally acknowledge my efforts, but they never did. When I shared my first job offer with them, they barely reacted. My mother simply said, "That's nice," while my father changed the topic to Emma's new relationship. It was always about her. Every achievement I had was ignored, while even her smallest accomplishments were celebrated like milestones. It hurt, but by then, the pain had turned into something else: determination. I realized I no longer needed their approval to feel proud of myself. I started to find peace in my own success, no matter how quietly it came. My friends became my support system, people who actually cared about what I achieved and how I felt. Still, a part of me longed for my parents' validation, for them to look at me with the same warmth they reserved for Emma. But that day never came. They were too blinded by their favoritism to see the person I had become: strong, independent, and worthy, even without their love or recognition. When I got engaged, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a chance to finally be happy and build something that was entirely mine. My fiancé was kind, understanding, and everything I had ever hoped for. For once, I thought life was giving me something beautiful after years of disappointment. I wanted to share my joy with my family despite everything that had happened because, deep down, a part of me still hoped they'd be happy for me. But the moment I told them, I could see it in their eyes. They weren't as thrilled as I expected. My mother forced a smile, my father mumbled congratulations, and Emma just stood there, smirking. It was like my happiness had offended them. Later, Emma pulled me aside and said, "Wow, you're actually getting married before me? That's surprising." The way she said it stung. She laughed afterward as if it was a harmless joke, but I knew what she meant. She couldn't stand that, for once, I had something she didn't. As the days passed, her bitterness became more obvious. She'd make snide comments about my fiancé, saying he seemed too calm or that he must be settling. My parents brushed off her behavior like they always did, saying she was just teasing. But I could see the envy in her eyes every time I talked about my wedding. Instead of being happy for me, they all made me feel guilty for moving forward with my life. Still, I tried to stay positive, telling myself not to let their negativity ruin my joy. Deep inside, though, I had a sinking feeling that Emma wouldn't let me have this moment peacefully. I just didn't realize how far she'd go to make my wedding about herself once again. From the moment I announced my engagement, Emma's jealousy became painfully obvious. She tried to act supportive in front of others, but her eyes told a different story. She'd constantly throw little jabs that sounded like jokes but were meant to sting. "I'm just shocked he chose you," she said once, laughing as if it were harmless. My parents, as usual, didn't correct her. They actually laughed along, saying things like, "Oh, that's just Emma's humor." But it wasn't funny. It was humiliating. Every time I shared a detail about my wedding, she'd find a way to criticize it. If I mentioned the venue, she'd say it was too plain. If I showed her my dress, she'd wrinkle her nose and say, "It's cute, but I'd pick something more elegant." She couldn't stand that. For once, the attention wasn't on her. I could see her growing restless with every passing day, as if my happiness was something she needed to sabotage. My parents didn't help. Instead, they kept making comparisons between our lives. They'd say, "Your sister was always the stylish one," or, "Emma's wedding will be something grand one day." It was like they were already trying to overshadow mine before it even happened. My fiancé noticed how their behavior affected me, and he'd remind me, "This is our moment, don't let them ruin it." I tried to listen, but the constant negativity drained me. The closer we got to the wedding, the more desperate Emma became to take the spotlight. I overheard her telling a relative that she felt overshadowed, and that I was rushing my marriage just to compete with her. It was absurd, but it showed me one thing clearly. My sister couldn't stand the idea of me being happy, especially when she wasn't the center of everyone's world. When the wedding planning began, I wanted everything to feel simple, elegant, and meaningful. I had dreamed of this day for so long, a day that would finally belong to me, not overshadowed by anyone else. But of course, my parents had other plans, and as always, those plans revolved around Emma. I wanted my best friend to be my maid of honor, someone who had supported me through everything, someone who genuinely cared. But my parents insisted that it had to be Emma. They said it was tradition, that it would keep peace in the family, and that it would look bad if I chose someone else. I protested, but they didn't listen. Eventually, I gave in, even though every part of me screamed not to. I knew how this would end, but I was too tired to fight. From the moment Emma was given that role, she treated it like a competition rather than a responsibility. She inserted herself into every decision, the decorations, the color scheme, even the guest list. If I said I liked something, she'd immediately find a reason to change it. When I tried to express my frustration, she'd act innocent and say, "I'm just trying to help. You should be grateful." My parents sided with her every time, claiming she was only trying to make my wedding perfect. But it wasn't perfection she wanted, it was control. She wanted to be the center of attention, just like always. She'd talk over me during meetings with planners, flirt with the groomsmen, and make snide remarks about my choices. What hurt most wasn't even her behavior, but the way my parents kept enabling it. It became clear that even on my wedding day, they'd rather see her shine than let me have my own moment of happiness. As the wedding drew closer, Emma's behavior became almost unbearable. She turned every moment into a performance, as if my wedding was her stage and everyone else was just a supporting act. At every dress fitting, she'd find a way to draw attention to herself. She'd wear dresses that were far too glamorous for a bridesmaid, each one tighter, flashier, and more revealing than the last. When the tailor politely reminded her that the dresses were supposed to match, she laughed and said, "Oh, but I can't help it if I look good in everything." I could see the smirk on her face every time someone complimented her appearance. It wasn't enough that she was part of my big day, she wanted to own it. During planning meetings, she'd interrupt constantly, suggesting ridiculous changes to the theme or decorations. If I said I liked something elegant and soft, she'd call it boring and insist we make it more fun. My parents, of course, backed her up every single time. My mother even told me, "Emma just has a better eye for these things, let her help." It felt like history repeating itself, my choices being ignored while Emma was praised for everything. But this time, it stung more, because it was supposed to be my moment. The worst part was how she acted around my fiancé's friends. She'd flirt shamelessly, laugh a little too loudly, and touch his groomsmen's arms while pretending to be charming. I could see the discomfort on their faces, but she didn't care. When I confronted her, she laughed and said, "Relax, it's just harmless fun." Nothing about it felt harmless. It was all calculated, all deliberate. She was doing everything she could to steal the spotlight from me, and my parents were letting her do it once again. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a calm evening, a chance for family and close friends to gather, laugh, and prepare for the big day. I had envisioned it as a peaceful moment before the storm, a night to breathe and simply enjoy the company of people who cared about me. But when Emma walked in, all the air seemed to leave the room. She arrived late, as always, making sure every head turned as she entered. And when I saw her, my heart sank. She was wearing a white dress. Not just any white dress. It was almost bridal, long, laced, and shining under the lights. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. The entire room fell silent, and everyone's eyes darted between us, waiting for my reaction. My mother rushed to compliment her, saying she looked stunning, while my father laughed awkwardly and said, "You two look like sisters on your big day." The words made my stomach twist. I could feel anger bubbling up inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had learned long ago that showing emotion only made them treat me like I was overreacting. Emma, of course, noticed my discomfort and smiled sweetly as if she had done nothing wrong. "Oh, don't be mad," she said innocently. I didn't realize it would look so bridal in person. Everyone laughed, and I was expected to laugh along too. But inside, something changed. I looked at her, standing there basking in stolen attention, and I knew this couldn't go on any longer. I wasn't the weak, voiceless girl I used to be. I smiled back at her that night, not out of forgiveness but because I had finally decided it was time to stop letting her humiliate me. My silence would soon end. The night before my wedding, I barely slept. My mind was spinning with a mix of anxiety, excitement, and the lingering sting of Emma's stunt at the rehearsal dinner. I kept replaying her smug smile in my head, that fake innocence she always hid behind. But this time, I wasn't going to let her ruin me. I had spent years being quiet, tolerating every insult, every time she took what was mine. I had cried behind closed doors while she basked in everyone's praise. But tomorrow was supposed to be my day, my one day, and I was determined to protect it, even if it meant doing something she'd never expect from me. While everyone slept, I sat by my window, thinking about the past. Every memory of being overlooked, every time my parents chose her over me, every moment I was made to feel invisible, it all came flooding back. I realized that Emma's power over me wasn't magic, it was my silence. I had given her control by always choosing peace. But peace meant nothing if it came at the cost of my self-respect. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I made up my mind. I wasn't just going to survive the wedding, I was going to reclaim my life. I planned everything carefully, knowing Emma's habits, her pride, and her need to always stand out. I didn't want revenge out of cruelty. I wanted justice, the kind that came from showing everyone who she truly was. I wanted the truth to speak louder than her lies. As I closed my eyes for a brief rest before the morning chaos began, I whispered to myself, tomorrow, everything changes. And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. The morning of my wedding arrived with sunlight streaming through the curtains, warm and golden, almost mocking in its perfection. Everyone in the house was buzzing with excitement, but I felt strangely calm, a calmness that came from finally knowing what I had to do. The makeup artist arrived early, and while she worked on me, I could hear Emma's laughter echoing from down the hall. She was bragging about how stunning her dress was and how everyone would be shocked when they saw her. I already knew she'd try to steal attention again, but this time, I was ready. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, confidence. My dress wasn't flashy or bold. It was elegant, graceful, and completely me. For the first time, I didn't care about anyone else's opinion. My fiancé had always told me that I looked beautiful when I was just being myself, and I wanted to carry that truth into this day. As the guests began arriving, I could sense the familiar tension in my parents' eyes. They were fussing over Emma, making sure she looked perfect, barely glancing at me. But I didn't care anymore. When Emma finally entered the bridal suite, I saw exactly what I expected. She was wearing a gown that was far too extravagant for a maid of honor, covered in sequins and designed to sparkle under every light. She smiled sweetly and said, "I hope I don't outshine you." I just looked at her and replied, "You won't." For once, my voice didn't shake. There was something in my tone that made her pause. She didn't know it yet, but by the end of the day, the spotlight she craved so much would destroy her, not me. The ceremony began beautifully, with soft music playing and sunlight filtering through the decorated canopy. Guests whispered compliments about the decorations, the flowers, and the peaceful setting. I walked down the aisle, my heart racing with a mix of joy and relief. My fiancé stood at the altar, his eyes filled with warmth and love that made every painful memory fade for a moment. It finally felt like this was my moment, the one no one could take away. But just as I reached him, Emma made her entrance. She walked in late, deliberately, wearing that glittering gown that caught every bit of light in the room. The crowd gasped, turning their heads toward her, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes as she took slow, deliberate steps, pretending to be embarrassed by the attention she had clearly planned for. My parents smiled proudly, as if she were the bride. The murmurs grew, and for a moment, I could feel the sting of humiliation creeping back, but I refused to let her ruin me this time. I turned to my fiancé, and he gently squeezed my hand, his reassuring smile grounding me. That was when I realized something. No matter what she did, I was the one standing at the altar, not her. The vows began, and while I spoke mine, I didn't look at my parents or Emma. I looked only at him, the one person who saw me for who I truly was. Emma tried once again to draw attention by pretending to cry dramatically during the ceremony, but this time, the guests noticed her act for what it was, selfish and disruptive. I didn't need to say a word. For the first time, she wasn't winning. And for the first time, I felt truly free. As the ceremony ended and the reception began, the atmosphere was filled with joy, laughter, and the soft glow of lights reflecting off the elegant decor. Everything looked perfect, and for a while, it truly felt like a dream come true. Guests congratulated us, music filled the air, and I finally started to relax. But deep down, I knew Emma wasn't done yet. She could never stand being ignored for too long. Sure enough, within an hour, she made her move. During our first dance, I caught her standing at the edge of the dance floor, pretending to wipe tears as people around her whispered. When the song ended, she dramatically approached us, hugging my husband first and telling him how happy she was for us. Her voice was dripping with false sweetness, but her eyes held the same smug gleam they always did. Then came her speech, the one she claimed she had written to honor her sister. I already knew it wouldn't be about me, and I was right. She started with a few kind words, then quickly shifted to jokes about our childhood, painting me as the clumsy, emotional sister who always needed saving. The crowd gave awkward laughs while she smiled proudly, thinking she was charming. My parents beamed at her like she'd just performed a miracle. But as I watched her, I didn't feel anger this time, just a strange calm. I realized I didn't need to react or defend myself. People were finally seeing her for who she really was, attention-hungry, insecure, and desperate. My husband noticed it too. He leaned in and whispered, "Don't worry. Everyone sees it now." And in that moment, I knew he was right. Her own need for control was slowly unraveling everything she had built. When Emma's speech finally ended, I could feel the shift in the room. The laughter had faded, replaced by uncomfortable silence and a few uneasy glances. People were beginning to see the truth. Her jokes weren't funny, they were cruel. She tried to laugh it off, raising her glass and saying, "It's all in good fun." But no one responded the way she expected. My husband gently took my hand and kissed it, his silent way of reminding me that she couldn't hurt me anymore. Then came the part one had been quietly waiting for, the surprise video my husband and I had prepared for the guests. It was a heartfelt montage of our journey together, from our first meeting to our engagement, filled with genuine laughter, small moments, and memories that reflected who we truly were. As it played, I could see everyone smiling, tearing up, and clapping. And then, near the end, came the moment that changed everything. The video included clips from behind the scenes of our wedding preparations, ones I had secretly recorded, where Emma was seen mocking my choices, insulting my dress, and bragging to her friends about how she would steal the show. The room went silent again, this time with pure shock. My parents froze, their smiles vanishing instantly. Emma's face turned pale, her fake confidence crumbling as everyone turned toward her. She tried to laugh, to deny it, but the proof was right there on the screen. I didn't have to say a single word. My revenge wasn't loud or cruel. It was poetic justice. For years, I had been the quiet one, the overlooked one. But in that moment, everyone finally saw the truth. The golden child had destroyed her own image, and I had finally reclaimed mine. The silence that followed the video was deafening. For the first time in my life, Emma had no words, no smirk, no clever comeback. She just stood there frozen, her face pale and her eyes darting around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. But no one did. The guests whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others glaring at her. My parents looked like they had seen ghosts. My mother tried to speak, but the words never came. My father simply lowered his head, shame finally flickering across his face. I stood there quietly, holding my husband's hand, watching the truth settle over the crowd like a heavy fog. For once, I didn't feel small or invisible. I felt powerful, not because I had embarrassed her, but because I had finally freed myself from the years of silence. Emma stumbled forward, trying to explain herself, saying it was all a misunderstanding and that she was just joking around. But no one believed her anymore. Her voice trembled, and when she looked at me, I saw panic instead of arrogance. I met her gaze calmly, not with anger, but with the quiet strength she had never seen in me before. "You've had the spotlight your whole life," I said softly, "but this time, you handed it to me yourself." The room stayed silent for a moment before applause began to fill the air, hesitant at first, then stronger. My friends and relatives came to hug me, offering congratulations not just for the wedding, but for finally standing up for myself. Emma left the hall soon after, tears smudging her makeup. And as I watched her go, I didn't feel guilt or pity. I just felt peace, the kind that comes when justice finally finds its way home. After the chaos of the reception, the night slowly began to calm down. The music softened, people returned to dancing, and laughter filled the air once again. But this time, it was genuine, light and real, not forced or fake like before. I could finally breathe without the weight of Emma's shadow hanging over me. My husband held me close and whispered, "You did it." You finally let go." His words made my eyes well up, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were of relief. For so long, I had believed I needed my family's approval to feel worthy. I had begged for love, for attention, for validation. But now, standing there surrounded by people who truly cared about me, I realized I didn't need their acceptance anymore. My happiness wasn't tied to their opinions or Emma's approval. It belonged to me. My parents avoided me for most of the evening, clearly embarrassed by what had happened, but I didn't approach them. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself or apologize for exposing the truth. They had spent a lifetime turning a blind eye, and now they were finally forced to see what they had created. As the night came to an end, I looked around the venue, the flowers, the lights, the laughter, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The years of being invisible, of being compared, of being treated as less, it all faded away in that moment. I wasn't the forgotten daughter or the other sister anymore. I was a woman who had endured, risen, and finally taken control of her story. As my husband and I left hand in hand, I smiled to myself knowing that my wedding day, once feared, had become my victory after all. After the whirlwind of the wedding, life settled into a new rhythm, one I had never imagined for myself. My parents and Emma continued to try reaching out, calling and messaging, but I didn't answer. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to respond. My husband and I had created a barrier, a protective wall, not out of spite, but out of necessity. The past decades of neglect, manipulation, and favoritism had left scars, and now I had the power to choose who got to see them. My husband, ever vigilant, documented every attempted intrusion, screenshots of messages and calls stacked up like evidence in a case we never intended to prosecute, at least not legally. The absurdity of their obsession with Emma's humiliation still made me chuckle. She had blamed me for everything, from her lack of friends to my husband supposedly being two-faced, and yet now it was their credibility that lay in ruins. We laughed together as we read her unhinged messages, amazed at how far her imagination stretched, all fueled by jealousy and resentment. My life, once dictated by their whims, was finally my own. I could make decisions without fear of backlash or accusations, and every choice we made together felt like reclaiming territory that had been stolen from me. Slowly, I realized that this wasn't just revenge, it was liberation. The freedom to live authentically, to love without judgment, and to protect what mattered most to me. And while I would have preferred a family who celebrated my happiness instead of undermining it, I learned something powerful. I didn't need their validation. The wedding had been the final proof. My life, my choices, my love, all untouched by their attempts to control or shame me. For the first time, I felt unshakably, unapologetically, free, and nothing could take that away.